I've never done anything like this before. So I just finished watching Dragon Ball Superhero. I'm a little late to the party. I know it's a fantastic film. I have qualms. It's not a perfect film. But, you know, I said the same thing about Dragon Ball Super Broly. So at the end of the day, I enjoyed it very much. It's just reliving my childhood. It made me very excited in many moments. It made me very emotional in many moments. It's a great film. But I had this train of thought, and I needed to share it. Even if it's with no one at all. I just need to get this recorded. So I will preface with the fact that I'm not really a Dragon Ball Super fan. I enjoy it as extended content. I enjoy it as more Dragon Ball. I don't really see it as a continuation, as a fulfillment of the story of the saga that Akira Toriyama had in mind. But I'm also of the belief that he kind of wanted to end it with the Cell Saga anyway. So the Cell Saga showed Goku passing on the mantle to Gohan, and letting Gohan take on the aspect of the Defender of Earth, the new hero, right? But the idea wasn't, we'll now switch over to Gohan's perspective as the very beginning of the Buu saga, you know, with the Great Saiyaman. That was kind of trying to tell that story. I think the idea initially was that Goku was saying, hey, my job here is done. You know, I'll let Gohan do what Gohan needs to do. And all that. Gohan becomes the savior of Earth, the protector of Earth. So that Goku can rest. Move on, basically. An allegory for saying the story can move on. The author can move on to other projects. And then Buu Saga happened because, of course, as a mangaka, as a manga artist, Toriyama was legally obligated to continue the story. But we got what we got, and we appreciate what we got. It is, you know, not something to be dismissed just because, you know, one doesn't agree with the directions it took. We have to accept that that story was written, and that's what was written. If you follow. So to bring it all back around to Dragon Ball Super, I feel like the scale has been increasing. Right? So, of course, throughout Dragon Ball and throughout Dragon Ball Z, all the main conflicts were for the sake of the Earth. And of course, you had Frieza over on Namek, and, you know, there's a point to be made there. There's a reason he is the most beloved of the Dragon Ball villains. but it was still planetary at that point, to make an argument. It's only towards the very end of Dragon Ball Z with not even Buu, right? Because for most of the Buu saga, Majin Buu, and even the first part of the Super Buu fights, it's about the fate of the Earth. It's not until Kid Buu shows up, blows up the Earth, goes over, blows up another planet, and it starts to like really set in that it's like, oh, this is beyond planetary scale. This is an entity that will, sow destruction throughout the universe, right? Yeah, blah, 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 blah. The point being, Dragon Ball Z is mostly planetary in scale, as much of its conflict goes. And so Super takes a step up to make the conflict more than planetary. What I'm trying to say in a roundabout way is Super puts in an effort to scale up the conflict through the Tournament of Power arc up to universal in scale, in scope, right? And so, what am I trying to say here? So Super has scaled up, right? Scaled up the conflict gradually more and more, making Goku and Vegeta not just planetary defenders, but galactic defenders, universal defenders, ultimately, right? They represent their universe in the Tournament of Power. And even looking past into Moro and Granola, it's kind of settled back in, right? Settled back in a little bit, but it's still universal in scale. It's still massive how far gone the power levels have gotten, right? And then Broly is kind of an attempt to lasso things back in, but as far as the scale of the conflict goes, right? Because you're not looking at, the fate of the universe, the fate of species, the fate of life. You're looking at just this one massive conflict, which, goes to show the guy who initially wrote it and didn't really write Super, and this is a little bit of a tangent. I don't think Toriyama intended for the scale of Dragon Ball to go so far as it did. And that on its own, honestly, isn't an argument to say Super is bad, which I wouldn't. I'm not trying to. I don't think Super is bad. I personally have my own disagreements and qualms. But that's not what this is about. This is about, and I took a very roundabout way of getting to here. Super has gone on and increased the scale more and more and more. Superhero, Dragon Ball Superhero, brings that scale crashing back down to Earth, makes a solid attempt, and let me rephrase that because that sounds like it didn't succeed in doing so, but refocuses the narrative, reframes the narrative back onto Piccolo and Gohan, and even through a little extension, Goten, Trunks, and Krillin. Krillin gets his time in the limelight. And so the point of Superhero is to showcase the superheroes, the new protectors of Earth. It's to showcase that while all this extra nonsense is happening at the universal scale, right? Here, Earth still needs its protector, which is Gohan and Piccolo and the new generation. That, a lot of people were complaining that throughout Super were, hyped up at the end, end of the timeline in Dragon Ball Z, and then kind of left on the wayside. This is this film is showcasing that they're still the heroes of Earth. We've just, as the audience and as the narrative, we've progressed beyond the scale of Earth, right? So, at this point, yes, Vegeta and Goku are the heroes, but we're bringing it back down to showcase that at the end of the day, Gohan did become the hero. He is the protector of Earth. That part of the narrative did get fulfilled, and it's kind of cathartic. It's honestly very cathartic. I don't know if anyone else reached this conclusion or even considered this, but yeah. and I know, like, in the grand scheme of things, Cell Max 1 is a bit of a retread, but Earth really was left in peace. Earth was really, the problems were solved, and Goku was right, in so much as he left, and Earth stopped getting messed with. Because, once he showed up and solved all the problems, put everyone in correction, and after that, the only people left were the people with huge grievances against him. So he left, and those grievances, of course, obviously still manifested. The whole Boo thing was a little bit of a contrivance, because the story needed to progress. But it was also the jumping point to push the narrative into that vaster scale, right? It was through the Boo saga that things were able to open up. And that's a way of looking at it, right? That's a perspective to take. Ultimately, my point is, what I'm so excited about, and why I felt the need to make this recording, was that Toriyama circled it back around. Rest in peace. I will forever miss him, honestly. He was a foundational part of my childhood and the childhood of many of the loved ones in my life. And to know that one of his parting acts was to fulfill the arc he wanted to fulfill, to wrap everything up in the first place. He wanted to end Dragon Ball with the Cell saga, with Gohan taking the mantle and ushering things into just a quiet era of peace. Then, of course, things continued. But now, in the epilogue of his own life, Toriyama wrote Superhero, and as big as things have gotten throughout Dragon Ball Super, scaled it back down to Earth and showcased that back here on Earth, things are a lot simpler.